The arrival. The transition felt like being torn apart at the molecular level and reassembled by someone who'd lost the instruction manual. One moment, I was in the Chrono launch chamber at the Temporal Research Institute in 2089, surrounded by the familiar hum of quantum processors and the anxious faces of my team. The next moment, I was lying face down on a surface that felt like glass, but pulsed with warmth, as if it were breathing. I gasped, my lungs burning as they tried to process air that tasted subtly wrong. Too clean, too refined, like it had been filtered through 1,000 layers of technology I couldn't begin to comprehend. When I finally opened my eyes, the world that greeted me was beyond anything our projections had predicted. The sky above was a swirling canvas of colors that shouldn't exist together, deep purples bleeding into electric greens, shot through with threads of light that moved with purpose, like living neural pathways. The buildings, if you could call them that, weren't built so much as grown. Organic structures of crystalline material that shifted and reformed as I watched, responding to needs I couldn't perceive. My temporal navigator was screaming warnings, its display cracked but still functional. January 1st, 4090. Temporal displacement, 2001 years. No. I whispered, frantically trying to recalibrate. We were supposed to jump 50 years forward to 2139 to verify climate restoration projections, a controlled, safe jump. Instead, the quantum field had destabilized, and I'd been thrown 2 millennia into a future that might as well be an alien world. I struggled to my feet, my archaeologist's instincts taking over, despite the terror flooding my system. Document everything, observe, survive, find a way home. But as I took in my surroundings, one overwhelming realization crashed over me. There were no people, at least not people as I knew them. Figures moved through the crystalline cityscape, bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape, but fundamentally different. Their bodies seemed to flicker between solid matter and something else, something that existed partially in dimensions I couldn't see. Some had what looked like wings made of light. Others had multiple limbs that phased in and out of visibility. Their faces were the most disturbing, beautiful in an uncanny way, with features that were almost human, but stretched, refined, perfected to a degree that crossed into the unsettling. One of them noticed me. Its head, her head, turned with fluid grace that defied normal biomechanics, and eyes that contained entire galaxies fixed on me. She moved toward me, not walking but gliding, her feet barely touching the ground. I tried to run. My legs, still shaking from the temporal displacement, betrayed me. I stumbled backward, falling against one of the crystalline structures. The moment I touched it, information flooded my mind, not words, but pure data, concepts and knowledge downloaded directly into my consciousness. Human, unmodified, temporal anomaly, origin, second digital age. Classification, archaeological specimen. Wait, I shouted, though my voice sounded pathetically primitive in this place. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Temporal Research Institute 2089. There's been an accident. I need help getting back to my time. The being stopped, tilting her head in a gesture that was eerily familiar, despite everything else being alien. When she spoke, the sound came from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing my ears entirely and manifesting directly in my mind. You are speaking ancient linguistic patterns, adjusting. There, can you understand this form of communication? Sarah Chen of the second digital age. Her voice in my head was like music and mathematics combined, beautiful and terrifying. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. You are afraid, she said, and there was something like curiosity in her tone. This is a chemical response we have documented in unmodified human specimens from your era, fear. We have eliminated this in our current forms. It serves no evolutionary purpose. But you still experience it. Fascinating. What are you? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. I am Aria 7, she said. Though the concept of individual identity, as you understand it, is quaint. I am both singular and plural, individual and collective. I am human, though you may struggle to recognize that truth. You're not human, I said flatly. Humans don't look like that. Something that might have been amusement rippled through our connection. We are human, Sarah Chen. We are what humanity chose to become. What you see before you is 2,000 years of guided evolution, genetic modification, neural enhancement, and consciousness expansion. We are Homo transcendentis, humanity that has transcended the limitations of biological form, while retaining the essential spark that makes us human. I stared at her, at this being that claimed to be human but looked like something from a fever dream. What happened? How did we get from my time to this? Aria 7 gestured, and the world around us shifted. Suddenly, we were standing in what looked like a memory, or perhaps a historical simulation. I saw cities like the ones I knew, with cars and buildings and people who looked human. Then the timeline accelerated, and I watched in horror and wonder as humanity transformed itself. The climate crisis of the 22nd century that had forced radical intervention, the great integration of 2347, when artificial intelligence and human consciousness first successfully merged, the genetic renaissance of 2650, when humanity began deliberately guiding its own evolution, the consciousness expansion of 3120, when the boundaries between individual minds became fluid and optional, the dimensional awakening of 3800, when humanity learned to perceive and interact with parallel dimensions of reality. Each change seemed reasonable in isolation, each step forward logical and beneficial. But the cumulative effect, viewed across 2 millennia, was staggering. Humanity had essentially redesigned itself from the ground up. We kept our humanity, Aria 7 said softly. That was always the guiding principle. No matter how much we changed our form, we preserved our capacity for creativity, for love, for wonder, for the ineffable quality that makes us human. But we shed the parts that caused suffering, disease, aging, involuntary death, the limitations of a single perspective, the prison of unmodified biology. And emotions, I asked, thinking of her earlier comment about fear. You eliminated fear. What else did you eliminate? We didn't eliminate emotions, she corrected. We refined them. Fear that paralyzes is gone, but caution remains. Rage that destroys is gone, but passion remains. Grief that breaks us is gone, but the capacity to mourn and honor loss remains. We kept what made us beautifully human and released what made us unnecessarily cruel, to ourselves and each other. I wanted to argue, to insist that you couldn't be human without the full spectrum of messy, complicated emotions. But looking at Aria 7, at the grace and power and alien beauty of her form, I wasn't sure what humanity meant anymore. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Why not just, I don't know, return me to my time, study me in a lab, lock me away? Because you are a gift, Sarah Chen, Aria 7 said, and for the first time I heard genuine warmth in her voice. A message from our ancestors. We have extensive records of the second digital age, your era, but they are just data. You are living memory. You can tell us what it truly felt like to be human before we transcended, and perhaps... She paused, and I sensed something like sadness. Perhaps you can tell us if we made a mistake. A mistake, I echoed. You've created a paradise. You've eliminated suffering, transcended death, become almost godlike. What mistake could you have possibly made? Aria 7 turned away, looking out over the crystalline city. We may have become so focused on what we could become that we forgot to ask if we should. There is a growing movement among us, a minority, but growing, that believes we have lost something essential in our transcendence, something that can't be measured or downloaded or engineered, something that died when we stopped being wholly and messily and imperfectly human. Before I could respond, alarms erupted across the city, not sounds but sensations, waves of urgency that crashed over me like physical force. Aria 7's form flickered, her attention pulled in a dozen directions simultaneously. "We have a crisis," she said quickly. "The temporal stabilization network has detected additional anomalies. You are not alone, Sarah Chen. There are others arriving from your time period, and not all of them are arriving safely." "Others?" My heart leaped. "My team? Are they—" "Come," Aria 7 commanded, and suddenly we were moving, not walking, but somehow traversing vast distances in heartbeats. The crystalline city blurred around us, and I realized she was carrying me through space in a way that made no physical sense, but worked anyway. We materialized at what I can only describe as a temporal convergence point, a place where the fabric of space-time was visibly torn, raw edges of reality sparking and bleeding. Through the tears, I could see glimpses of other times, other places, and emerging from one of those tears was a figure I recognized immediately. "Marcus!" I screamed. "Marcus Rodriguez!" My colleague, my friend, stumbled through the temporal rift, looking as disoriented and terrified as I'd felt minutes ago. But unlike my arrival, his was violent. The rift was collapsing around him, and I could see his body beginning to phase between solid and ethereal, caught between time periods. "He's fragmenting," Aria 7 said grimly. "The temporal displacement is tearing him apart across multiple timelines simultaneously. If we don't stabilize him in the next 30 seconds, he'll cease to exist in any meaningful way." "Then help him," I shouted. "I cannot," Aria 7 said, and I heard genuine anguish in her voice. "Our technology is designed for our current forms, our transcended biology. His unmodified human body is incompatible. The systems would destroy him faster than the temporal fragmentation." "Then what do we do?" Aria 7 turned to me, and in her alien eyes I saw something I recognized: desperate hope. "You do it. Your temporal navigator, it's primitive technology by our standards, but it operates on principles compatible with unmodified human biology. If you can link it to him, create a temporal anchor between the two of you, you might stabilize him long enough for us to repair the rift." "Might?" I demanded. "What are the odds?" 17% chance of success, 63% chance of mutual temporal fragmentation, 20% chance of catastrophic timeline collapse affecting both your origin point and our present. I stared at Marcus, at my friend who'd made jokes during every safety briefing, who'd convinced me to join the temporal research program in the first place, who'd once told me that the best part of science was that you got to be proven wrong and learn something new. He was screaming now, his body flickering between multiple states of existence, his face a mask of agony. 17% wasn't good odds, but it was better than the 0% he had without intervention. I grabbed my temporal navigator, already moving toward him. "Tell me what to do." What happened next would haunt me for the rest of my existence, however long that might be. Aria 7 guided me through a process that was equal parts physics, prayer, and improvisation. I had to synchronize my navigator with Marcus's, creating a quantum entanglement between our temporal signatures while simultaneously routing power through my own body to stabilize his fragmenting form. It felt like being electrocuted from the inside out. My nervous system lit up with pain that transcended physical sensation, and I could feel Marcus's agony joining mine, our consciousnesses bleeding together as the temporal fields merged. For one eternal moment, I was both myself and Marcus simultaneously. I experienced his memories flooding my mind, his childhood in Mexico City, his PhD defense at MIT, the moment he'd first seen the temporal equations that proved time travel was possible, his fear and wonder as he'd stepped into the launch chamber, knowing he might never return. And in that moment of perfect connection, I understood something that would change everything. Marcus hadn't been trying to jump to 2139. He'd deliberately sabotaged the temporal coordinates, aiming for the far future. He'd known something I didn't, seen something in the projections that terrified him. He'd been trying to escape, the temporal anchor locked into place with a sound like the universe itself sighing in relief. Marcus solidified, his body stabilizing into a single timeline, a single reality. He collapsed into my arms, both of us shaking with exhaustion and shock. "I'm sorry," he gasped, blood trickling from his nose. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I saw what was coming. In 2139 there's—" He coughed, his body still recovering from the trauma. "There's something terrible, something that makes all of this—" He gestured weakly at the impossible city around us. "Necessary, a choice humanity has to make, transcend or die. And I couldn't watch it happen." Before I could demand answers, more alarms erupted. Aria 7's form flickered urgently. "The rift is destabilizing further," she announced, "and there's something coming through, something that shouldn't exist, something that's been following your temporal wake." Through the torn fabric of space-time, I saw it, a shadow that moved wrong, that bent light around itself in impossible ways, that radiated wrongness like heat from a furnace. It was massive, formless, and somehow I knew with absolute certainty that it was hungry. "What is that?" I whispered. Aria 7's voice was hollow with an emotion I hadn't heard from her before. "Fear. That is why we transcended. That is the reason humanity had to become what we are. It is a temporal predator, a being from outside our dimension that feeds on temporal paradoxes and reality inconsistencies. Your arrival, the rift, the temporal fragmentation, you've created a feast for it. And if it fully manifests in our timeline, what happens? Then the last 2,000 years of human history unravel. Every choice, every transformation, every step toward transcendence erased. Humanity reverts to its 2089 state, but in a world that's been shaped by our transcended technology. The contradiction would be catastrophic. The shadow pushed through the rift, and reality screamed. And I realized that whatever nightmare I'd thought I'd stumbled into, it was about to get infinitely worse. The predator's hunger, the temporal predator, emerged fully into 4090, and reality itself recoiled. The crystalline structures around us began to crack, not physically, but conceptually. I watched as buildings that had stood for centuries suddenly flickered between existence and non-existence, their timelines hemorrhaging. "We need to move," Aria 7 commanded, her form blazing with light as she erected some kind of protective barrier around Marcus and me. "The predator feeds on temporal inconsistencies, and you two are the largest inconsistencies in our entire timeline. It will hunt you specifically." "Then send us back," Marcus shouted, still weak, but forcing himself to stand. "Close the rift, seal us back in 2089, and your problem is solved." Aria 7's expression, if you could call it that, was anguished. "The rift is collapsing but not closing. Your arrival has created a permanent scar in space-time. Even if I could send you back, the predator would follow the temporal wake. It would consume your era first, then work its way forward, devouring every moment between your time and ours. 2,000 years of human existence erased." The shadow thing that was the predator moved like oil across water, its form constantly shifting, impossibly large and terrifyingly fast. Where it passed, the transcended humans, Homo transcendentis, screamed in ways that bypassed sound entirely, their consciousness fragmenting as their enhanced forms became liabilities. The predator was feeding on the very technology and evolution that made them transcendent. It's targeting them specifically. I realized with horror. The more evolved they are, the more temporal complexity they contain, the more it can feed on them. Correct, Aria 7 said, and I heard resignation in her voice. Our transcendence made us powerful, but also paradoxical. We exist partially outside normal time, which makes us a more substantial meal for a being that feeds on temporal anomalies. You, with your primitive, unmodified biology, are almost invisible to it by comparison. Unless we draw its attention, Marcus finished grimly. Unless we become the bait. I stared at him. You knew this would happen. When you sabotaged the jump, you knew we'd end up here. You knew this thing existed. What did you see, Marcus? What did you find in the projections? He met my eyes, and the guilt there was overwhelming. I hacked the deep time predictive models 3 months ago. I saw the choice point in 2139. The moment when humanity discovers the temporal predators exist and are heading toward Earth. I saw the only 2 paths forward. Transcend into forms the predators can't easily digest, or remain human and be consumed within a generation. Humanity chose transcendence. But I also saw... Sarah, I saw that the predators are attracted to temporal experiments. Our research, our time travel program, we're ringing a dinner bell across dimensions. You brought us here to warn them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You risked both our lives, risked catastrophic temporal paradoxes. To what? Give these future humans a heads up about something that already happened in their past? No! Marcus grabbed my shoulders, his grip desperate. I brought us here because the projections showed something else, something impossible. In every timeline where humanity transcends, the predators eventually find a way to consume us anyway. In every timeline where humanity stays unmodified, we're destroyed. There's no winning scenario. Except one. Aria 7 had been listening while maintaining the barrier, but now her attention snapped fully to Marcus. What scenario? Our temporal models show no path where humanity survives unaltered past 2200. We have run trillions of simulations. Your simulations are missing a variable, Marcus interrupted. Me, us, unmodified humans arriving at this exact moment, creating a temporal paradox so profound that it attracts a predator to 4090 instead of to its historical appearance point in 2139. We can change when the predator arrives, which changes everything about how humanity responds. The implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. You're trying to rewrite the timeline. You want to prevent the transcendence by warning them early, by giving them time to find a different solution. Not prevent it, Marcus said urgently. Evolve it. Give humanity 2,000 more years to develop defenses before the predator arrives naturally. The transcendence happened too fast, too desperately, in response to an immediate existential threat. But if we can reset the timeline, if we can give them warning now... The predator roared, not a sound but a sensation of reality tearing, and crashed against Aria 7's barrier. The crystalline shield shattered into mathematical fragments, and we were suddenly exposed. "Run!" Aria 7 screamed, her form blazing as she threw herself at the predator, buying us seconds with her own existence. We ran. Marcus pulled me through streets that were disintegrating under the predator's influence, past transcended humans who were trying to fight or flee or simply comprehend what was attacking them. Their enhanced forms were magnificent, but vulnerable. Evolution optimized for a paradise, not for war. "Where are we going?" I gasped, my primitive human lungs burning with exertion. "The temporal archive," Marcus shouted back. Aria 7 transmitted coordinates to me during the barrier. It's where they store the collective memory of humanity, every moment from the beginning of consciousness to the present. If we can access it, if we can understand the full timeline, maybe we can find a way to fix this. We burst through a doorway that formed in response to our approach and found ourselves in a space that defied description. It wasn't a room. It was a dimension, an infinite library where memories existed as tangible objects, where history could be touched and experienced directly, and we weren't alone. A group of beings waited for us, transcended humans, but older, somehow, their forms more refined than even Aria 7's. Their leader stepped forward, and I recognized the essential humanity in his movements, despite his alien appearance. "Dr. Sarah Chen, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "I am Zenith One, the oldest, continuously existing human consciousness. I have lived for 947 years, across multiple forms, and I have been waiting for you since I was a child in the year 3143. "Waiting for us?" I echoed. "How could you—" "Because this moment is a temporal loop," Zenith One explained calmly, even as the building shook from the Predator's assault outside. "Your arrival in 1490, the Predator's manifestation, this conversation, it has all happened before, will happen again, is happening eternally, across infinite parallel timelines. We are trapped in a recursive causality loop, and every iteration ends the same way, with humanity's extinction." Marcus had gone pale. "The projections didn't show this. They showed we could change things. You saw what we allowed you to see," Zenith One said, not unkindly. "We have been manipulating the deep-time predictive models in your era for decades, leaving breadcrumbs, hoping that eventually someone would be brilliant and reckless enough to follow them here. Because we have tried everything else, every possible solution, and we keep failing. The Predator always wins. Humanity always ends. Unless—" He gestured, and the archive around us came alive with images. I saw timeline after timeline, humanity transcending in different ways, at different speeds, with different technologies. In some, we became pure energy. In others, we merged completely with machines. In still others, we evolved into forms I couldn't even comprehend. And in every single timeline, the temporal Predator found us, fed on us, erased us. "Why?" I whispered. "What did we do to attract these things?" "We became interesting," Zenith One said simply. "Human consciousness, in all its forms, generates a unique signature across dimensions. The more complex we become, the more we shine like a beacon to beings that exist outside normal reality. The Predators aren't evil. They're just hungry, and we are an exquisite meal." "Then there's no hope," I said, feeling despair crash over me. "If every path leads to the same end—" "There is one path we have never tried," Zenith One interrupted, "because it requires something we transcended humans no longer possess. The capacity for complete, irrational, self-destructive sacrifice, the willingness to choose death over transcendence, to choose limitation over power, to choose humanity over survival." Marcus understood before I did. "You want us to collapse the timeline, erase the transcendence, reset humanity to 2089 and destroy all temporal technology so we never attract the Predators in the first place." "Yes," Zenith One confirmed. "We have the technology here in the archive, a device that can rewrite causality itself, collapse all timelines into a single unchangeable flow. But it requires a living link to the past, someone whose consciousness is rooted in the unmodified human experience. It requires both of you to willingly sacrifice yourselves, to become the anchor point for the timeline collapse." "And what happens to humanity?" I demanded. "In this reset timeline? Do we survive?" "You survive without transcendence," Zenith One said. "You remain limited, mortal, vulnerable. You face the climate crisis, the resource wars, all the suffering that transcendence allowed us to overcome. Billions will die over the centuries from causes we eliminated. You will age and sicken and die, generation after generation, never knowing the paradise we achieved." But we'll survive, Marcus said, as humans, real, messy, mortal humans, and the predators never find us because we never develop temporal technology. Correct. I looked at the transcended humans around me, these beings who had overcome every limitation, conquered death, achieved something close to godhood, and I saw the terrible tragedy of their existence. They had everything except the one thing that could save them, the ability to choose to be less. There has to be another way, I said desperately. Some path where humanity survives and keeps the transcendence, where we fight the predators and win. The archive shook as the predator broke through the outer defenses, through the walls, through reality itself. I could see it approaching, a vast shadow that was consuming everything in its path. Transcended humans were blinking out of existence by the thousands, their complex consciousnesses unable to resist the predator's hunger. We have tried fighting for 2,000 years across infinite timelines, Zenith One said, his ancient voice heavy with sorrow. We always lose. The predators are not more powerful than us. They simply exist on a level of reality where our weapons cannot reach. The more advanced we become, the more vulnerable we are to them. It is the universe's cruelest joke. Our evolution made us magnificent and doomed us simultaneously. Aria 7 appeared in the archive, her form flickering and damaged from her battle with the predator. "It's here," she gasped. "The final defenses are failing. Zenith 1, if you're going to implement the solution, it must be now." Marcus turned to me, and I saw my own terror and uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "Sarah, we have to decide. Let humanity transcend and face extinction from the predators, or collapse the timeline and trap humanity forever in mortal limitation." "That's not a choice," I said, my voice breaking. "That's impossible. How can we play God with the fate of our entire species?" "Someone has to," Marcus said gently, "and the universe chose us by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe this is why we became scientists, to stand at this exact moment and make this exact choice." The predator crashed against the archive's walls, and I felt its hunger like a physical presence. It didn't hate us. It simply needed to consume us as naturally as we breathed air. There was no malice, no evil, just existence and appetite. And I realized that Marcus was right. This was why we dedicated our lives to understanding time, to pushing the boundaries of knowledge, not for glory or discovery, but for this, the moment when all possible futures converged into a single choice. Save humanity by limiting it forever, or allow transcendence and accept extinction. "I need more information," I said, my scientist's mind refusing to make a decision without data. "Show me the reset timeline. Show me exactly what happens if we collapse causality. I want to see the future we're choosing." Zenith One nodded and activated the archive's visualization systems. And what I saw changed everything. The choice between futures. The visualization bloomed around us like a flower made of possibility and pain. I watched the reset timeline unfold with the detached horror of someone witnessing their own species' fate. 2089, the temporal experiment fails, catastrophically. Marcus and I cease to exist in a burst of quantum annihilation. The Temporal Research Institute is destroyed, and 317 people die in the resulting explosion. Temporal research is banned globally for the next century. 2139, no transcendence. Humanity faces the climate crisis without the miraculous technology that transcended humans would have developed. 2 billion people die in the resource wars and climate collapse. No temporal predators arrive because humanity never develops the technology to attract them. 2200. Humanity stabilizes at a population of 4 billion, having lost half its pre-crisis numbers. Life is harder, shorter, more brutal than in the Transcendence timeline. Average lifespan, 63 years. Infant mortality returns to 20th century levels. Cancer, Alzheimer's, A heart disease, all the afflictions transcendence would have eliminated, ravage each generation. 2400, slow technological progress. No consciousness expansion, no genetic renaissance, no dimensional awakening. Humanity remains stubbornly, painfully human, but they survive, they build. They love and suffer and create art and wage small wars and make peace and continue the messy business of being alive. 4090, a world I barely recognized, still human in the way I understood humanity, limited, mortal, struggling, but also vibrant, diverse, fundamentally unchanged from my era in all the ways that mattered. The population was smaller, the technology less miraculous, but the essential spark of humanity burned exactly as it had in my time. 4 billion lives lost in the first century alone, I whispered, watching the reset timeline's casualty projections. 4 billion people who would have lived in the transcendence timeline. But 12 trillion human lives lived over the next 2 millennia, Zenith 1 countered. Mortal lives, yes, limited lives, but lives nonetheless. In the transcendence timeline, we achieve a population of 800 billion consciousness clusters by 4090. But then the predator consumes us all. Total extinction. In the reset timeline, humanity never exceeds 6 billion at any given time, but they endure forever. Marcus was staring at the visualization with an expression I'd never seen on his face, a mixture of grief and determination. You're asking us to kill billions to save trillions, to choose quantity of life over quality, to doom humanity to suffering so they can survive. I'm asking you to choose humanity's continuation over humanity's perfection, Zenith 1 said. Because we learned, too late, that perfection is a dead end. Transcendence made us magnificent, but it also made us fragile. We became like crystals, beautiful, complex, and easily shattered. Unmodified humanity is crude by comparison, but also resilient. You bend where we break. Aria 7, still flickering from her wounds, spoke up. There is something else you should know about the reset timeline. Something Zenith 1 is too proud to tell you. She gestured, and the visualization shifted to show a different aspect of the future. In the reset timeline around the year 2847, I saw humanity make first contact with an alien species. Not the temporal predators, but actual intelligent life from another star system. The aliens were nothing like humans, crystalline beings that communicated through light frequencies, but they were peaceful, curious, and willing to share knowledge. In the transcendence timeline, we never encounter them, Aria 7 explained. Our evolution takes us into dimensions they cannot perceive. We become invisible to normal space-time, isolated in our perfection. But in the reset timeline, limited humanity remains grounded in normal reality, and the aliens find them. That contact leads to a cultural and technological exchange that enriches both species for the next millennium. So, in one timeline, we transcend alone and die, I said slowly. In the other, we remain limited but build a future as part of a galactic community. It's not that simple, Zenith 1 interjected. The alien contact brings its own challenges, wars, misunderstandings, the pain of cultural collision. It's not a paradise, it's just different. Every timeline has suffering, every choice has costs. The archive shuddered again, and through the walls I saw the predator consuming more of the city. Transcended humans were evacuating in streams of light, fleeing to defensive positions or other dimensional spaces, but I could see the inevitability in their movements. They were delaying the end, not preventing it. How long do we have? I asked. The archive will hold for perhaps 20 minutes, Zenith 1 said. After that, the predator will breach the final defenses and consume us. The device that can collapse the timeline requires 15 minutes to charge and calibrate. Once activated, you will have approximately 30 seconds to make physical contact with it, linking your unmodified consciousness to the temporal rewrite. Then, both of you will cease to exist, along with everything that happened after your original jump from 2089. And if we don't activate it, Marcus asked quietly, then the Predator finishes consuming this era and works its way backward through time, erasing everything. The transcendence never happens because there's no future to transcend into. But your original era also gets consumed. The Predator will feed on the temporal research that allowed you to jump forward in the first place. The causality loop collapses, but chaotically, unpredictably. Humanity might survive in some form, but we have no models for what that form would be. So our choices are deliberate reset to mortal humanity or chaotic collapse with unknown results, I said. Those are terrible options. All options at the end of the universe are terrible, Zenith One replied. That's why they're called ends. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him. My colleague, my friend, the man who dragged me into this nightmare because he'd seen a pattern in the data and had the courage, or the arrogance, to act on it. Did you know it would come to this? I asked. When you sabotaged our jump, did you know we'd be standing here making this choice? He shook his head. I thought we'd have more options. I thought finding the transcended humans early, warning them, would give them time to prepare, to find a better way. I didn't expect the temporal loop, the recursive causality. I didn't expect... He gestured helplessly at the archive, at the Predator, at the impossible situation. I'm sorry, Sarah. I thought I was saving humanity. Maybe I just doomed it in a different way. Before I could respond, a new group of transcended humans materialized in the archive. These were different, more military in bearing, their forms hardened into something that looked almost like armor made of light and mathematics. Their leader approached Zenith One with sharp, efficient movements. The defensive lines are collapsing faster than projected. The Predator has adapted to our weapons. We estimate 8 minutes before archive breach, not 20. Zenith One's form flickered, the transcended equivalent of a grimace. Then we're out of time. Sarah, Marcus, you need to decide now. I'm initiating the timeline collapse device regardless. If you choose to use it, you'll have 8 minutes to make peace with your choice and activate it. If you choose not to use it, I'll shut it down at 7 minutes and 50 seconds and we'll face the chaos collapse together. The device rose from the floor of the archive. Or perhaps it had always been there, and we were only now allowed to perceive it. It looked like a sphere of frozen lightning, crackling with energy that made my teeth ache and my temporal navigator scream warnings. Marcus moved toward it instinctively, and I grabbed his arm. Wait, I said urgently. We need to think about this, really think about it. We're talking about rewriting causality, erasing 2,000 years of human history, condemning billions to death so that trillions can live mortal, limited lives. That's not a decision we can make in 8 minutes under duress. What other choice do we have? Marcus demanded. Let the Predator consume everything. At least the reset timeline preserves something of humanity, even if it's a diminished version. Diminished? Aria 7 interjected, her voice sharp. You speak of unmodified humanity as if it's inferior to us, but you're wrong. We are not superior, we are different. We traded certain qualities for others. We gained power and lost resilience. We achieved perfection and lost adaptability. The humanity of the reset timeline isn't diminished. It's the humanity that can survive what we cannot. I stared at the device, at the crackling sphere of possibility that represented the power to unmake history. And suddenly, with the clarity that comes in moments of extreme crisis, I understood something crucial. It's not about choosing which humanity is better, I said slowly, working through the realization as I spoke. It's about choosing which version gets to exist at all, and we're the wrong people to make that choice. Everyone turned to look at me. "What do you mean?" Zenith One asked. "We're scientists," I said. "We're trained to observe, to analyze, to seek truth. But this isn't a scientific question. It's an ethical one, a philosophical one. Who are we to decide that 4 billion lives are worth sacrificing to save trillions? Who are we to decree that humanity should remain limited and mortal instead of achieving transcendence? We don't have the wisdom or the right to make this choice." "Then who does?" Marcus asked. "The transcended humans created this device and brought us here specifically to make this choice. Someone has to decide." "No," I said firmly. "Someone has to refuse to decide. We have to find a third option." The archive shook violently and cracks began appearing in the walls. Not physical cracks, but conceptual ones. Places where the Predator's hunger was breaking through the barriers between dimensions. "There is no third option," Zenith One said urgently. "We have run every simulation, explored every possibility." "You explored every possibility that maintains causality as a linear flow," I interrupted, my mind racing. "But what if we don't collapse the timeline or let it be chaotically consumed? What if we split it?" Everyone stared at me. "Split it?" Aria 7 echoed. "You mean create a parallel timeline? That's not... We can't... Why not?" I demanded. "You've transcended death, disease, dimensional boundaries. Why not causality itself? Create a branch point at 2089. In one branch, the timeline continues as it has. Humanity transcends, faces the Predator, and fights with full knowledge of what's coming because we're here to warn you. In the other branch, the temporal experiment fails safely. Humanity never develops time travel, and the reset timeline unfolds." "That's impossible," Zenith One said flatly. "A deliberate timeline split of that magnitude would require energy equivalent to a temporal predator's feeding," Marcus finished, his eyes going wide. "Sarah, you're a genius. We don't collapse the timeline or let the Predator consume it. We hijack the Predator's feeding process and redirect the energy into creating a parallel timeline. Both futures exist, transcendent and mortal, and humanity survives in both forms." "That's insane," the military leader said. "Even if it were theoretically possible, controlling a predator's feeding process would require someone to interface directly with it, to guide its consumption. That level of contact would be fatal," I finished. "It would require someone to sacrifice themselves as the interface between the predator and the device. Someone with an unmodified consciousness that the Predator can digest, but also someone linked to the timeline collapse technology, someone exactly like Marcus and me." The archive fell silent, except for the sound of reality breaking around us. "One of us would have to die," Marcus said quietly. "Feed ourselves to the Predator while simultaneously activating the device, redirecting its consumption energy into timeline bifurcation instead of destruction. Both humanities would survive," I said. "The transcendent line would continue with full warning of the Predator's existence, centuries to prepare for their arrival. The mortal line would develop naturally, eventually meeting those aliens, building their own future. And the cost would be just one life instead of billions." "Or 2 lives," Marcus said, meeting my eyes. "If one of us has to be the interface, the other could serve as the anchor point, stabilizing the bifurcation from the 2089 side. We both sacrifice ourselves, but we save both timelines." Zenith One was frantically calculating, his form blazing with processing power. "The mathematics, it's theoretically possible. Incredibly dangerous. Probability of success maybe 30%, but possible. The energy requirements align, the causality vectors resolve. This could actually work." "Could," Aria 7 emphasized. It could also result in both timelines collapsing or create an unstable bifurcation that merges back together catastrophically, or feed the Predator enough energy to breach into our dimension permanently. The risks are enormous. But the potential reward is everything, I said. Both versions of humanity surviving, no one forced to choose between limitation and transcendence. Both futures, real and valid. The Predator crashed against the archive's outer barrier, and I felt its hunger like a living thing. We had maybe 5 minutes left. "I'll do it," Marcus said immediately. "I'll be the interface. This was my fault. I brought us here. I created this crisis. Let me fix it." "No," I said firmly. "We both do it together. If the odds are better with 2 anchor points, then that's what we use. We came here together. We face this together." Marcus started to argue, then stopped. He knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was made up. "Together, then," he said softly. "One last experiment." Zenith 1 approached us, his ancient form radiating something that might have been respect. "If you do this, if you sacrifice yourselves for both timelines, you will be remembered. In the transcendent line, we will honor you as the ones who saved us with warning and time. In the mortal line, you'll be remembered as the researchers who died in the temporal accident, never knowing how much you gave us." "I don't need remembrance," I said. "I just need to know we did the right thing." "You're giving humanity a choice," Aria 7 said. "Both versions the right to exist. That's the most human thing anyone has ever done." The Predator broke through the outer barrier. "Now!" Zenith 1 commanded. "If you're going to do this, it has to be now." Marcus and I moved to the device together, our hands reaching for the crackling sphere of frozen lightning. The moment we touched it, I felt the connection snap into place, felt myself linking to causality itself, to every possible timeline, every choice, every moment. And as the Predator breached the final defenses and entered the archive, as its hunger crashed over us like a wave of dissolution, I reached out, not with my hands, but with my consciousness, and touched the vast, terrible beauty of the being that had come to consume us. It wasn't evil. It wasn't even conscious in any way I could understand. It simply was, and it was hungry, and we were delicious. But in that moment of contact, I understood how to redirect its appetite. "Now, Marcus," I screamed, "activate the bifurcation." Together, we poured every ounce of our consciousness into the device, into the Predator, into the moment, and reality split. Split infinity. The moment we touched the device, the archive blazed with impossible energy, and the temporal Predator surged toward us, a living abyss, infinitely hungry for paradox. Its approach was a terrible gravity, reality warping and quaking under its shadow. I felt Marcus's hand in mine, and together we faced oblivion. In that instant, as the Predator's essence enveloped us, a sensation, a truth, flooded our joined consciousness. The Predator was not malevolent, not truly aware. It simply was, a force of nature incarnate, a cosmic answer to the existence of unresolved paradoxes, feeding on the fertile chaos in highly evolved timelines where causality becomes fragile. We were catalysts and sustenance, offered willingly. We opened ourselves, guided by instructions racing through us from Zenith 1 and Aria 7. Focus. Let your unmodified humanity define the boundary. Anchor the split. Channel the event through your core memories and deepest intentions. The Predator thundered at the door and we let it in. For a heartbeat longer than eternity, we were everywhere. Every echo of our lives, every possibility of our choice, every consequence. A rush of suffering, love, loss, struggle, triumph, all things human and transcendent at once. As the Predator began to feed, time itself fractured. We directed the energy, shaping it not into chaos or collapse, but into two luminous branching rivers, one timeline where transcendence endured, and another untouched by our intervention, where humanity remained fragile, uncertain, and irrepressibly real. I saw memories not my own, a transcended artist, painting with dark matter and cosmic rays, knowing the danger but refusing to let go of wonder. A mother, centuries later, in the mortal line, rocking a feverish child to sleep in a candlelit world, whispering stories of the stars. In both timelines, joy, sorrow, small daily victories, and awe at the universe's mystery. Then the tension broke. The predator, its hunger sated and redirected, dissolved into the new timelines, its power woven into the roots of creation. Above us, the bifurcation blossomed, each branch radiant and unique, coexisting, neither overwriting the other. Zenith One's weary voice echoed through the archive, already receding into history. You did it. You gave us the only gift that matters, choice. I feel them, Marcus whispered. Both futures, both real. We knew we were fading, the cost of the act as foretold. We would remain only in the cracks, as faint archetypes in the collective unconscious, remembered only in legends in both worlds. That, too, was enough. Goodbye, I thought as the world turned one last time around us. When the bifurcation settled, the transcendent timeline braced itself for the next era, wiser and prepared, armed with centuries of warning and hope. In the other line, under star and candle and rain, humanity pressed on, imperfect, passionate, devastatingly mortal, and forever capable of growth. The clock had struck 4090, and there was no turning back. But now, whichever path they walked, humanity was no longer the same, and could never be again. Two humanities, one legacy, the transcendent timeline, 4090, 3 months after the bifurcation. Aria 7 stood in what remained of the archive, now transformed into a memorial. Where the device had once crackled with impossible energy, there was now a monument, two figures rendered in crystalline light that never dimmed, holding hands as they faced an eternal storm. Sarah Chen and Marcus Rodriguez, captured in their final moment of choice. They saved us, she said to the gathering of transcended humans who had come to witness the unveiling. Her voice carried across dimensional frequencies, touching thousands of consciousnesses simultaneously. Not by choosing one future over another, but by refusing to accept that only one future could exist. They gave us the gift of warning, and they gave our parallel selves the gift of ignorance, the freedom to develop without the burden of knowing what we would become. Zenith One, his ancient form now reinforced with new purpose, addressed the assembly. The temporal predators will return in 63 years, according to the original timeline. But we are no longer following that script. We have been preparing defenses, developing technologies that exist partially outside causality itself. When they arrive, we will not be prey, we will be ready. In the crowd, a young transcended human, barely 50 years old, which made her practically an infant by their standards, raised her voice. But what about the other timeline, the mortal branch? Don't they deserve to know what's coming? They will face their own challenges, Aria 7 said gently. Different challenges. In their timeline, we never attract the predators because they never develop temporal technology. They remain beautifully, frustratingly limited. They will struggle with disease, death, the entropy of flesh. But they will also develop in ways we cannot. We'll make connections with other species who exist in normal space-time. We'll preserve something essential that we traded away in our transcendence. She gestured, and the memorial shifted, showing glimpses of the other timeline, snapshots pulled from the quantum foam of possibility. A hospital where doctors fought to save lives with primitive but improving technology. A child being born in pain and joy, an elderly woman dying surrounded by family, her last breath carrying wisdom earned through mortal limitation. "They are our siblings," Zenith One said, "separated at birth by an act of supreme sacrifice. We cannot communicate with them, the bifurcation is absolute, but we can honor them by living well in the time we were given." Arya 7 placed her hand on the memorial and felt an echo, not words, but a sensation, a presence that might have been the last remnant of Sarah Chen's consciousness, preserved in the quantum structure of the monument. "Live," the echo seemed to say. "Live magnificently. That's why we chose this, so both versions of humanity could live." The mortal timeline. 2089. 0. The moment of reset. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the ruins of the Temporal Research Institute, her hazmat suit protecting her from the residual radiation that saturated the compound. The explosion had been catastrophic. 317 dead, including the entire Temporal Research team. "It was a quantum cascade failure," her assistant explained, pulling up data on a tablet that kept glitching from the electromagnetic interference. "The temporal field destabilized during calibration. The energy release was beyond anything we predicted was possible." Elena knelt beside a melted piece of equipment, recognizing it as part of the Temporal Navigator prototype. Two names were etched on a memorial plaque nearby: Dr. Sarah Chen and Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, lead researchers, presumed vaporized in the initial blast. "Shut it down," Elena said quietly. "All of it. Every temporal research program, every time travel experiment, every attempt to manipulate causality. This is what happens when we try to play with forces we don't understand. We're not ready for this technology. Maybe we'll never be ready." Her assistant nodded solemnly. "The UN Security Council is already drafting the global temporal research ban. It'll pass unanimously. No one wants to risk another disaster like this." Elena looked at the memorial plaque one last time. What were they working on? The last experiment before the cascade? According to the logs, they were attempting a 50-year forward jump. Nothing radical, just basic observation protocols. But something went wrong with the quantum field stabilization. The energy signature was strange, almost like the universe itself rejected the attempt. "Maybe it did," Elena said. "Maybe we're meant to experience time linearly, one moment flowing into the next. Maybe shortcuts through causality are nature's way of telling us we're going the wrong direction." As she left the ruins, Elena didn't notice the small temporal anomaly that flickered briefly in the air, a moment where reality seemed to split, showing two paths diverging from a single choice before collapsing back into a single stream. She didn't see the phantom images of two figures holding hands, smiling as they faded into the quantum foam of might have been. The mortal timeline flowed forward, unaware of its twin, unburdened by the knowledge of transcendence and predators and impossible choices. It would face its own challenges: climate catastrophe, resource wars, the painful, slow progress of limited beings trying to survive in an indifferent universe, but it would face them human, messy, mortal, magnificently human. The transcendent timeline, 4153, 63 years after the bifurcation. The temporal predators arrived exactly when predicted, a fleet of them, emerging from dimensional rifts across 3 star systems. They came hungry, expecting easy prey, another civilization caught mid-transcendence, vulnerable and unprepared. They found something else entirely. Arya 7, now one of the eldest continuously existing consciousnesses in human civilization, led the defense. The transcended humans had spent 6 decades preparing, guided by the warning Sarah and Marcus had died to deliver. They had developed weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, shields that redirected temporal hunger back at its source. traps that exploited the predator's own feeding patterns against them. The battle lasted 3 days or 3 centuries, depending on which temporal reference frame you measured from. When it ended, the predators retreated, wounded and confused, having encountered prey that fought back with understanding born of sacrifice and warning. We won. Zenith 1 transmitted across the collective consciousness, not because we're stronger, but because 2 unmodified humans gave us the gift of time. Time to prepare, time to understand, time to evolve our defenses as carefully as we evolved ourselves. At the memorial on the archive, now a pilgrimage site visited by transcended humans from across explored space, Aria 7 added a new inscription. They split infinity so both futures could live. The predators came and we survived because of them. May we never forget what unmodified humanity gave us, the choice to become what we are, and the warning that let us survive becoming it. The Mortal Timeline, 2847, 8 centuries after the temporal ban. Captain Jennifer Okafor stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Dream, humanity's first faster-than-light vessel, and watched as the alien ship approached. First contact, the moment that would change everything. The crystalline beings who emerged from their vessel were nothing like humans, photonic life that communicated through complex light frequencies, ancient civilizations that had been traveling the stars when humanity was still learning to control fire. Through mathematical translations and carefully coded light pulses, communication was established. The aliens had been watching Earth for centuries, waiting for humanity to reach the stars, to be ready for the galactic community. "Why did you wait?" Jennifer asked through the translation device. "We've been sending radio signals for centuries. Why not contact us sooner?" The alien's response, translated into human terms, carried something like amusement. "We have learned that species develop best when they mature naturally. Intervention in a civilization's development often causes more harm than good. You had to reach us in your own time, by your own means. And we're ready now? You have survived 8 centuries without destroying yourselves, despite knowing you face mortality, resource limitation, and the entropy of flesh. You have chosen art over war more often than not, cooperation over conquest, hope over despair. Yes, humans of Earth, you are ready." As the alien delegation prepared to share their knowledge, medicine that could extend human lifespan to 150 years, energy systems that would solve resource scarcity, the secrets of peaceful coexistence with dozens of other species, Jennifer thought about the small memorial on Earth, at the site of the old Temporal Research Institute. 317 names were carved there, including 2 that held places of honor, Sarah Chen and Marcus Rodriguez, the researchers whose deaths had ended humanity's brief flirtation with time travel and set them on a slower, more cautious path through history. "Thank you," Jennifer whispered to memory and empty space. She didn't know why those words came to her in that moment, didn't understand the weight of gratitude that settled over her for 2 people who died 7 centuries before her birth. But somehow, standing at the threshold of humanity's greatest adventure, she felt it was important to acknowledge them. In ways she could never know, she was right. The space between timelines, eternal moment. Sarah Chen and Marcus Rodriguez existed in the space between, not alive, not dead, but preserved as a quantum echo in the bifurcation they had created. They were consciousness without form, awareness without body, suspended in the moment of their choice. They could see both timelines simultaneously, watch them unfold like parallel rivers flowing from a single source. The transcendent line, magnificent and prepared, fighting battles against cosmic predators with weapons born of warning and time. The mortal line, limited and resilient, reaching out to the stars with crude but determined ships, making friends across the galaxy through the universal language of hope and curiosity. "Did we do the right thing?" Marcus asked. Though asking and answering happened simultaneously in this place outside time. "We did a human thing," Sarah replied. "We saw an impossible choice and we refused it. We created a third option, because that's what humans do. We don't accept the limitations presented to us. We push back against inevitability." They watched as both timelines flourished in their different ways. The transcendent humans building a civilization that spanned dimensions, pushing the boundaries of what consciousness could be. The mortal humans building a civilization that spanned star systems, preserving what consciousness had always been. Both timelines had suffering. Both had joy. Both had meaning. "I don't regret it," Marcus said. "Neither do I," Sarah agreed. "Even if we're stuck here forever, suspended between possibilities, I don't regret choosing that both humanities should live." But they weren't stuck. Not entirely. In every moment when someone in either timeline made a choice, really made a choice, standing at a crossroads and choosing one path over another, Sarah and Marcus felt it. A tiny validation of what they'd done. A reminder that existence itself is an infinite series of bifurcations, that every conscious being splits reality with every decision. They had just done it more literally than most. When the clock struck 1490, Sarah mused, we realized there was no turning back. And humanity was no longer the same, Marcus finished. But that was okay, they said together. Their consciousnesses so intertwined after centuries in the space between that they'd become something new. Not individual, not merged, but partnered in a way that transcended both. Because humanity was never meant to be the same. We were meant to grow, to change, to become. And now, in two timelines, we get to do both, transcend and endure. Evolve and preserve, reach for the stars, and remain grounded in mortality. In the transcendent timeline, Aria 7 felt a whisper of gratitude from the memorial and smiled with consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions. In the mortal timeline, Captain Okafor felt an inexplicable urge to honor two names she'd only known from history lessons, and did so without understanding why. And in the space between, two scientists who'd made an impossible choice watched both humanities live, and knew that sacrifice measured in love rather than loss could echo through eternity. The clock had struck 1490. There was no turning back, and across two timelines, in infinite variations and possibilities, humanity was no longer the same, and never would be again.